When I first reviewed the No Time to Spy movie back in 2024, I thought this was the best Loud House production the show had ever done on a cinematic scale. Although I never mentioned it in my review, I consider this movie to be somewhat of a spiritual, if not an official, series finale to the franchise. Everything from the story, to the heroes, to the villains, and even the fallout from the family's action-packed spy adventure, this movie really did feel like it was going to be the final chapter of the series. Or at least that's the impression I got when I was watching it. You know how some TV shows and movies often have a big wedding scene at the end, and usually that's where the overall story comes to a close? That's how I felt about No Time to Spy, it being the last big adventure for the Loud family following the production of Season 7. Obviously, this movie came out as Season 8 was airing on Nickelodeon, and characters such as X made a comeback that very same season, so No Time to Spy didn't turn out to be the big epic finale as I thought it was going to be. Still, one question was always on my mind. Where does the series go from here? What can the characters do that they haven't done already? The simple answer would be to watch Season 8 and beyond to see what happens. In terms of feature-length films, however, the answer is a bit more festive. And that's what today's video is all about. A Loud House Christmas movie, naughty or nice. I never thought we'd get an animated movie based on a holiday, but we did, and this one was something. There's a lot I want to say about this movie, so you're gonna be here for a while. But before I get right into it, I'm just going to make one thing very clear. Unlike some fans, I am not going to complain about the fantasy elements featured throughout the movie. Although I used to think Santa Claus was the one figure that seemed to be very much imaginary in this animated universe after not appearing in any of the other previous Christmas episodes, I also knew it was only a matter of time before he showed up. Between ghosts, zombies, aliens, and everything from the Casa Grandes movie, seeing a bunch of elves at the North Pole shouldn't even be remotely surprising by this point. In other words, nothing is truly off limits in this franchise. The movie chooses to approach Christmas in the same fantasy style as pretty much every other holiday special, and I'm okay with that. I may have my disagreements with how fantasy elements are used in some instances in the TV series, but the way they're used in this movie is not all that bad. Some of them are pretty damn funny if I'm being totally honest. And trust me, using magic and high-tech science to push the story forward and explain how and why certain things happen are the least of my concerns when it comes to this movie. Also, given how the story is structured, I'm led to believe this movie is non-canon, and I'll explain why as I go along. The best way I can put it is that it feels like something straight out of fanfiction, which, again, I'll explain as I go along. So now, without much further ado, join me as I, SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, bring you my review of a Loud House Christmas movie, naughty or nice. The first thing I want to talk about is the story and the writing. The story is about Lincoln being told by one of Santa's elves that he's been placed on the naughty list and therefore won't be getting the Rip Hardcore multi-tool he really wants for Christmas. Feeling the need to fix this little problem, Lincoln manages to get a hold of the elf's gingerbread iPad and use Lisa's technology to hack into the naughty nice system to put his name on the nice list. However, a technological mishap causes everyone in his family to get coal, while he's the only one to get the present he asked for. With the help of his family, Lincoln has to make things right by traveling to the North Pole, which turned evil because of his meddling with the naughty nice system. With some additional help from the elf who created the naughty nice system, everyone works together to get everything back to normal, including Santa Claus himself. It sounds like an interesting premise, but it's a little more complicated than that. The movie essentially uses the typical plotline of a character who is only concerned about getting Christmas presents and caring very little about what the true meaning of the holiday is all about. The plot takes elements from the Christmas episodes 11 Louds a Leapin' and Seasons Cheatings, more so from the latter than the former. In fact, I would say Naughty or Nice is just a longer and more cinematic version of the aforementioned Season 5 episode. Lincoln goes to extreme lengths to get a specific Christmas present, and while he does accomplish his goal, it comes at the cost of screwing over a loved one. Coincidentally, the ending of the movie is played out the same way it did in the episode, with Lily presenting Lincoln with his gift after the protagonist fixes his mistake. For the record, my score for Seasons Cheatings has changed dramatically since I first reviewed it back in 2020, so just keep that in mind as I go through this video. Now, unlike No Time to Spy, the story for Naughty or Nice wasn't written by any of the regular writers from the TV series. This movie was written by Tony Gamalobo and Rebecca May, two people who have never written for the animated series. Even though they did a great job at writing for the Casa Grandes movie, They clearly don't know how to write for the Loud House. But that isn't to say they don't have any experience in writing for the series in general. They both worked on A Really Haunted Loud House, the live-action Halloween movie. Knowing how bad that movie turned out, that probably tells you everything you need to know about the writing of this Christmas movie. Their minimal understanding of the series is greatly reflected in how the characters are portrayed. Even though Darren McGowan was brought on to direct the movie and Michael Rubiner serving as producer, it really does come down to the writing. Given their history of working on the show, I'm surprised McGowan and Rubiner didn't have more creative input before going ahead with the final script. Or maybe they did have some input, and the final product is how they envisioned the movie. However, the writing isn't all that bad because there are some things I do genuinely like when it comes to the characters and their involvement in the overall story. That's not true for everybody, but I'll get to that soon enough. As far as the pacing goes, the film feels like it moves pretty quickly. It jumps right into the main story, and everything feels a little snappier with very few moments where the plot slows down. Before I talk about the characters, I do want to briefly highlight the setting, or I guess settings, of the movie. The two primary locations are Santa's Village at the North Pole and Gingerhausen somewhere in Michigan. The layout of Santa's workshop at the North Pole is honestly very detailed. It's like a combination of a factory, shopping mall, and military base all rolled into one. Think of the workshops from the Polar Express and the Santa Claus movies, just a lot more colorful and with talking nutcrackers. Then there's Gingerhausen, a Christmas-themed village with many different shops and snow-related activities. It's here they have a mailbox that delivers letters directly to Santa at the North Pole, hence why the family makes it a tradition to come to this little village every year. Funny how this place was never mentioned or shown in any of the other holiday specials that also took place on Christmas Eve. It's also rather interesting that the family delivered their letters the day before Christmas instead of mailing them a few days or weeks in advance to make sure Santa's elves could fulfill everyone's wishes on time. It's almost as if all of this was created just for storyline purposes. Now do you see why I believe this movie is non-canon and possibly inspired by fanfiction? Then again, maybe this could explain why the kids are able to get so many Christmas presents despite their parents claiming to always be on a budget. It may contradict the implied notion that the parents bought all the gifts, but in this movie, it's Santa Claus who's responsible for bringing all the gifts. And hey, if Santa can be real just like he is in every other Christmas special, that means Krampus is real too. And he is! Even though he doesn't make an appearance during the main feature, Krampus does appear in the form of a decorative Christmas drawing during the end credits, in which he can be seen signing Lucy's autograph book. And you know, it's funny how Lucy wanted this mythical creature's autograph and then she was all disappointed when she got a lump of coal. Krampus is known for punishing naughty children on Christmas, and typically naughty kids get coal. What makes this even more hilarious is that Lucy asked Santa for some black-colored objects, and yet she was anything but happy when she received a black lump of coal. Talk about irony. And speaking of mythical Christmas figures, I just want to briefly touch base on Santa's design. He looks absolutely nothing like the Santa who appeared in seasons 7 and 9. Assuming those two appearances were just random guys in traditional costumes, this Santa is the real Santa. However, he only wears his signature red suit towards the end of the movie. His main attire mostly consists of regular gray pants and a red and green sweater, at least when he's in his nice form. His naughty form more closely resembles his standard Christmas outfit, except his coat is replaced with a sleeveless shirt, candy cane sash, and a jingle bell choker around his neck. Oh, and he wears a black toupee to cover his bald head. These were certainly some interesting design choices, that much I will say. But anyway, on to my discussion of the other central characters of the movie. One of the most interesting things I can say about the characters is how diverse the cast is, and I'm not just talking about the Loud family. A few minor and recurring characters make background cameos and have speaking roles, which is a lot more than what the first two animated movies had. Even Clyde appears on screen for more than just a few minutes. He actually plays a major role during the first half of the movie. He helps Lincoln in capturing and confronting Duncan after the kids believe he's following them. He also brings up some very vital information about Lincoln's character, but I'll talk about that part later. Even though he stops being relevant by the time the Louds begin their journey to the North Pole and only appears one last time before the movie ends, I gotta give the writers credit for at least giving Clyde a good amount of screen time compared to the two previous films. And while some characters like Chandler and Flip are used to demonstrate the aftermath of Lincoln's meddling of the naughty and nice lists, characters like Cheryl and Merrill are mostly used as NPCs. Them and Mr. Grouse don't really add anything significant to the story other than existing as people Lincoln tries to help so he can get get back on Santa's nice list, even though his good deeds actually create more trouble for the people he thought he was helping. Still, I can appreciate minor characters like Catherine Mulligan and Patchy Drizzle showing up for a few seconds just to offer a little exposition. Now, as far as the entire Loud family is concerned, this was their best ensemble performance out of all 3 movies. They collectively have more screen time and dialogue in this movie compared to the others. Everyone has the chance to do and contribute something to the movie, whether it's something small, something a little goofy, or something that helps to advance the story. Their biggest contribution was partaking in the epic battle against the evil Christmas creatures at the North Pole. That entire action sequence was my favorite part of the movie. It had the perfect blend of drama and comedy, and how they went about taking down the bad guys was pretty good, but I'll talk more about that part later. What's most eye-catching about the family is that they don't wear their regular clothes from the TV series. Because the movie takes place on Christmas, they're mostly seen wearing their traditional winter attire. They also wear some very festive outfits just for the holiday, and these are some of my favorite designs if I'm being totally honest. Not gonna lie, but the Christmas clothes worn by the girls actually look a little better than what they're supposed to normally wear. I'm a sucker for unique character designs, what can I say? I also noticed that Luna was wearing green eyeshadow instead of her usual purple. That's one change I honestly would have never expected. But yes, I really do love how integral the Loud sisters and parents are to the plot. The little things they do at Gingerhausen become relevant as the story unfolds, and this movie is loaded with many setups and payoffs. The giant starlight Lisa bought for the house was not only a major component in how Lincoln ultimately messed up Christmas, but the energy beam she's able to generate from it was used to open a portal to the North Pole. Finding the exact location of the portal, a water fountain in Gingerhausen to be precise, was thanks to the placemat Lily was playing with and coloring on. Yeah, apparently the placemat is an actual map to the North Pole. Why does Gingerhausen have these things publicly available? Because reasons. Of course, finding the exact spot where the portal was opened in the fountain area was thanks to Lola and Lana taking selfies around the village as part of a scavenger hunt. While taking a ride on a cable car, Lola snapped a picture that showed Duncan touching a cobblestone, the exact spot where the portal was located. Lori making a nice sculpture of Bobby and Lucy secretly being in love with an ugly Christmas sweater also played a role in the opening of the portal. With a little help from the head of Lori's sculpture and Lucy no longer being ashamed of showing off her sequin Christmas sweater, Lisa is able to direct the energy beam to where it needs to be, thus opening the portal to the North Pole. Then there's the part where Luann bought a portable cuckoo clock. As annoying as that thing was, it came in handy when she used it to literally throw the bad guys off her trail, albeit only temporarily. And remember how Lisa's letter to Santa was in the form of a hologram and Lynn Jr.'s letter was in the form of a paper airplane? These things turned out to be very useful in the family's battle at the North Pole. Lisa used the hologram function to distract the evil elf army, while Lynn took all the other letters from the giant mailbag and fired a barrage of paper airplanes to chase off the bad guys. That's not every setup and payoff the movie has, but I think you can see what I'm getting at. The Loud sisters and parents may not have any significant character arcs or undergo any major changes like Lincoln, but their involvement in the overall story cannot be ignored. They did a lot more here compared to what they did in the other movies, so I can appreciate the writers for giving them a much bigger spotlight. Speaking of spotlight, Lincoln is once again the main protagonist of the story. As usual, he's the one who goes through the most development and undergoes a character arc that helps him to see the error of his ways. Full disclosure, I wasn't too keen on how he was portrayed. Right from the start, you can already tell what direction the story is going to take with his character. He makes a video to tell Santa that he's more focused on holiday sentiment and not just getting presents. But in reality, getting presents is the only thing he's focused on. He wants a rip hardcore multi-tool, and that's pretty much the only thing on his mind during the first act. While his family is discussing their favorite parts of Christmas, like spending time with friends and being generous to others, Lincoln just keeps going on and on about the multi-tool. This causes his family to get mad at him because he's missing the whole point of what Christmas is all about. This movie blatantly ignores the lesson his character learned in the Christmas specials from seasons 2 and 5. Rather than learning that it's more important to give than it is to receive, Lincoln is more wrapped up in the receiving part. I honestly don't blame his family for chewing him out for ruining the sentimentality of their little song number. But before I continue talking about Lincoln, I have to talk about the other central character of the movie, and that would be Duncan. He's one of the main elves at the North Pole, and he's very well respected by pretty much everyone, or at least almost everyone. Duncan is presented as some kind of computer genius who invented the technically integrated naughty nice Santa list, or tinsel for short. Similar to Lincoln, he too goes through a character arc that helps him see the error of his ways, mostly having to do with the main purpose of his tinsel system. On Christmas Eve, Duncan's system detects Lincoln flipping back and forth between the naughty and nice lists, and this is throwing off the final tally before Santa has to head out to deliver presents. The elf is sent to Royal Woods to personally observe Lincoln so he can make one last determination on this kid's naughty or nice status. Lincoln keeps flipping back and forth between doing something bad and doing something good, so it's no wonder the tinsel system can't make a final call. Duncan eventually explains the situation to Lincoln, and after inadvertently making things worse based on his actions, Lincoln is officially put on the naughty list. Lincoln tries to stop Duncan from reporting back to the North Pole, but he opens a portal and disappears. However, Duncan left his gingerbread iPad behind, and that's when Lincoln decided to manipulate the system by taking his name off the naughty list and putting it on the nice list. He sneaks into Lisa's bedroom to use her laptop as a means of hacking into the tinsel system so he can implement the change. However, he doesn't realize how extremely unstable the laptop is. Lisa was already having trouble when she tried tapping into the electrical grid to power the giant starlight on top of the house. Because of this, an electrical overload combined with Lincoln pressing too many buttons on the iPad caused the system to go haywire and change the naughty and nice list completely, not to mention destroying the iPad in the process. He effectively switched everything around by putting all the nice people on the naughty list and all the naughty people on the nice list. All the naughty people, including himself, got presents, and all the nice people got lumps of coal. His actions even turned the North Pole from happy to jolly to dark and evil, including Santa. However, Duncan is the only one to be spared from what happened. He explains how he was in a giant freezer full of ice cream during the mayhem, and that's why he was protected from the switch in the naughty-nice polarity. So, magic cancels out science? Okay then. Anyway, this disruption of the Christmas time continuum resulted in characters like Chandler becoming the mayor, Flip owning and converting every business in town including Lynn's table into a food fuel, and Scoots getting a giant monster truck. In other words, all the bad guys got what they wanted for Christmas, while all the good guys did not. While it's never actually seen, it's greatly implied that everyone around the world was affected by Lincoln's meddling of the tinsel system. To put it simply, Lincoln got what he wanted, but it came at the cost of screwing over his loved ones, and he effectively ruined Christmas for everyone in Royal Woods. As you can see, the story presents Lincoln as the flawed protagonist whose selfish behavior caused him to totally butcher the holiday, and that means he has to be the one to do something really big in order to make amends. So he and his family open a portal to the North Pole and come face to face with evil and diabolical versions of all the creatures who live there. They sneak into the main office where the tinsel system is located, and Lisa successfully restores the naughty and nice lists back to how they should be, but nothing changes. Santa and his minions capture the family and show everyone a video montage of all the bad things Lincoln had been doing on Christmas Eve, including the moment from 2 minutes earlier where he told Lisa to keep him on the nice list despite everything he did. Kinda weird how the camera is positioned from the perspective of the audience instead of from the perspective of the ginger pad. Santa even shows a montage of the residents of Royal Woods and even the Loud House itself being terrorized by Chandler and all the other jerk characters to further illustrate how Lincoln's actions messed up things for everyone. This makes his family's earlier defense of him being a good kid a lot more indefensible. Lincoln is then forced to admit to being a bad kid, and he surrenders to Santa, who sees this kid as a visionary and wants his help in coming up with even more naughty ideas for future Christmases. While Lincoln sifts through evil Santa's plan to rebrand the holiday into something darker and more obscene, the rest of the family and Duncan are forced into working in an underground coal mine for eternity. As if it wasn't made abundantly clear by now, Lincoln is portrayed as an antagonist and his family are the victims of his actions. Storyline-wise, I understood what the movie was going for. The main character's bad decisions caused serious problems and everyone was made to suffer the consequences. This isn't anything new and it's been done before. All the same, this is part of the reason why I believe the movie is non-canon and something pulled directly from fanfiction. Lincoln is written as a naughty kid, but because this movie is supposed to be set in the Loud House universe, he realistically shouldn't be the only member of his family to be on Santa's naughty list. Everyone should be on the naughty list. I could easily run down an entire list of every naughty thing everyone in the Loud family has done over the years. Maybe some instances are not as bad as others, but you could make a case for why every member of the family should be on the naughty list instead of only one. Hell, even Lynn Jr. asked Santa to keep her brother in a crate during the first few minutes of the movie. How does that not cause her name to flip back and forth between the naughty and nice lists? The point I'm making here is that the entire Loud family has done bad things, and they're objectively no different than Lincoln. But for some reason, the movie is set up in a way where it makes most of the family look innocent, while Lincoln is the odd one out. The story deliberately makes Lincoln look like the only bad guy, and it's very unfair when compared to the main series. Just to be clear, I'm not even a huge fan of his character, nor am I an avid defender of everything he does. There are moments in both the TV series and this movie where he rightfully deserves to be punished for his wrongdoings. However, this is why I believe the movie exists in its own separate universe. The fact the story chooses to ignore all the wrongdoings committed by the rest of his family in the TV series makes watching the movie very frustrating. Knowing the many bad decisions the Lau sisters have made over the years, it makes that little moment of the parents freaking out about their kids being naughty come off as very unrealistic. This is also why I believe the movie is like something straight out of fanfiction. You know, the kind of story where Lincoln is treated horribly while everyone else is treated very well. Again, I'm not even a big fan of his character, but this movie kinda feeds into the Lincoln torture side of the fandom. I hate saying that phrase, and I know it's very overused and misused, but with how his character is handled, it's not entirely unfair to apply that phrase to this movie. The central premise of Naughty or Nice could possibly work if it wasn't based on an already existing series. If the movie had its own original characters in their own original universe, I think everything would actually be better, even if the story is very generic. You'd be working with a lot of blank slates, thus making the writing process a lot easier. But because the movie is centered around the Loud House and the audience already has a general understanding of the characters and their personalities after nearly a decade, it doesn't really work as good, if at all. That being said, the Loud House could make this story work, but not with Lincoln as the protagonist. Do you know who I think should have been the main character of this movie? In my opinion, Lola would have been a better choice. The way I see it, Naughty or Nice has the right kind of story, but it focuses on the wrong character. It's ironic hearing that Lola was on a hot streak of being good all year, when normally you expect her character to be more naughty than nice, given her track record from the TV series. When you have episodes like Prize Fighter in which the main character openly admits to being a monster and then proceeds to act like one, you'd have a difficult time trying to rationalize why Lola can't be the flawed protagonist of this Christmas movie. Lincoln is a flawed character as well, but not as much as some of the other members of his family. I'm not saying he's perfect, but hopefully you get what I'm saying. And actually, there's another character who I think would have made for a better protagonist. That would be Luann, and here's why I think that. Clyde rattles off all the bad things Lincoln did that put him on Santa's naughty list. While there aren't any flashbacks to show how and why Lincoln did all these things, it would appear he was engaging in the acts of pranking, lying, and just being a conniving trickster. It's true Lincoln does pull some sleazy stunts on others, but it's mostly when he's trying to gain the upper hand in some conflict he's having with either his sisters or his classmates. The lying part I can understand since he's done that sort of thing before, but the idea of Lincoln pulling pranks just for his own satisfaction doesn't sound right. I know he's a kid, but after all this time, he's not the kind of character who's going to say, "I'm going to play an April Fool's Day joke on my neighbor just because I think it'll be funny." That's the kind of mentality you'd expect more from Luann. When you really think about Clyde's list of everything Lincoln did in the past, Luann definitely would have been better suited for the lead role. Given her extensive history of taking extreme measures to prank her family, some of which being either very painful or very humiliating and never really feeling bad about it, you'd think that would land her on Santa's naughty list. But despite her character history, how does she manage to stay on Santa's nice list and not Lincoln? Yeah, sure, you could say she does apologize for her wrongdoings and does get a taste of her own medicine. Maybe that's why she was spared from being placed on the naughty list. That's probably the same reason why Lola and her other sisters were able to stay on the nice list. But if these characters are able to see the error of their ways and still get presents from Santa, then why doesn't this apply to Lincoln? How can he be the only one flipping back and forth between the naughty and nice lists? In the TV series, he's been shown to be remorseful in his actions, and he does try to make amends after he screws up. The movie, however, conveniently depicts Lincoln as the kind of kid who doesn't feel all that bad about the pranks he's pulled on his neighbors, which, again, is not consistent with his character. Now, even though Lincoln does act remorseful for what he had done in the movie, his behavior does flip-flop a little bit. At various points, Lincoln continues to act defiant and insists that he's still a good kid and he didn't do anything wrong. He tries to make it seem as if he didn't have a choice but to manipulate the naughty and nice lists. He actually says it was Santa's fault for why everyone got coal. He says, "Santa made me make you all get coal." In a way, this actually validates his flip-flopping status and why he deserved to be on the naughty list. Still, he's the only one who was going to get the short end of the stick, while the rest of his family was going to be getting Christmas presents despite whatever naughty behavior they displayed in the past. This is why the movie is so frustrating to watch in terms of writing. The film intentionally makes Lincoln look like the only bad guy by having him uncharacteristically say and do things he wouldn't normally do just for the sake of storytelling. Again, if the movie was centered around either Lola or Luann, then everything would have made more sense. At least there's visual evidence to justify why they should be on Santa's naughty list, since they clearly have a lot more to atone for than their brother. But regardless, Lincoln manages to get away from Santa and reunite with his family on how to get everything back to normal. The switching of the naughty and nice lists had nothing to do with why the North Pole was still messed up. It turns out that the electrical power surge that went through Duncan's ginger pad caused a change in the chemical composition of Christmas magic at the North Pole. This explains why everything in Santa's village was evil and why the river Lori and Rita found looked dirty. Remember how I said magic was the answer to everything? Well, it's true. The North Pole has this thing called Christmas magic that flows from a mountain, and this stuff gets put on everything. This kind of magic is what makes Christmas, well, Christmas. The only trace of magic the characters have at their disposal is the stuff Lynn Sr. bought from Gingerhausen. This was another example of a storyline setup and payoff. Lynn Sr. wanted to make his traditional figgy pudding, a callback to the Season 2 Christmas episode, and he heard there's a shop at Gingerhausen that sells a secret ingredient that would make it taste really good. He gets his hands on a bottle containing a purple liquid that is said to come from the North Pole. How that crazy-eyed lady was able to get her hands on pure Christmas magic is never explained, but who cares? Lynn Sr. sacrifices his special ingredient to help restore the North Pole back to how it should be. So while the family fights off Santa's evil army, Lincoln and Duncan begin scaling the mountain where the magic is supposed to come from. They plan to pour the purple liquid into the main source so they can get the magic flowing again. However, their plan is interrupted when Santa shows up on a flying reindeer-shaped gingerbread motorcycle. It has a laser beam that turns people into cookies. Remember when Majin Buu fired an energy beam at Dabura and turned him into a cookie? Yeah, it's basically the same thing here. Santa starts blasting at Lincoln and Duncan, and he manages to shatter the bottle containing the magic. Lincoln jumps in front of Duncan to save him from being hit by the laser, thus turning him into a cookie, and he, for lack of a better way of putting it, dies as a result. Then a glowing piece of Christmas magic comes out of the cookie and travels into the small cave where the magical source is located. This causes all the magic to return to the North Pole, reverting everyone and everything back to normal. The magic spreads to Royal Woods, and presumably the rest of the world, and all the truly naughty characters have their undeserved Christmas presents taken away. And of course, this causes Lincoln to transform back into his human form. Simply put, Lincoln choosing to be nice and making a noble sacrifice to help someone other than himself caused him to awaken the magic inside of him, thus completing his character arc. Again, I understand what the movie was going for, and while I don't think it's a bad ending in theory, it's how the movie got to the ending that doesn't sit right with me. As much as I don't want to compare movies, I feel as if I have to so I can better illustrate my point. Lincoln's performance in the Christmas movie is a stark contrast to his performance in No Time to Spy. I know his character is flawed in both films, but there's a big difference in how his character is written. Lincoln may have made some serious miscalculations as a secret agent and almost destroyed his family's lives in the worst way possible, but his intentions were always pure and well-meaning. In the long run, his actions ultimately took down the bad guys, and he still managed to save his grandparents' wedding. And remember, he wasn't the enabler of Fifi's diabolical plan to ruin Myrtle's life. He may have fallen into her trap, but Lincoln wasn't the one responsible for everything Fifi had been planning for years. This is a huge contrast to the Christmas movie, where Lincoln is the enabler of the bad guy's plan and the reason why Royal Woods was turned upside down. Santa would have never turned evil, let alone created a plan to ruin future Christmases, had it not been for Lincoln caring only about himself. Even though Lincoln was technically thinking more about himself than his own family at the beginning of his spy mission, he wasn't just looking out for himself, and that's made clear when he decided to stay behind on the rocket after getting everyone else to safety. His goal was to not only prove he was a good spy, but also to save his family from an actual threat. In other words, he was an antagonist in theory, but a hero in the grand scheme of things. In Naughty or Nice, his intentions were purely selfish, and how he went about achieving his original goal was very antagonistic to everyone around him. He didn't care what he had to do to get what he wanted, so long as he got what he wanted. Him not getting a RIP Hardcore multi-tool for Christmas is not a life or death situation. Maybe it's a threat to his own ego, but not for the entire planet. He basically screwed up the whole world all in the name of a Christmas present that wasn't even a limited edition like he thought it was. I know both movies have him making a noble sacrifice to put things right, but the circumstances leading up to said sacrifice is more meaningful in the spy movie compared to the Christmas movie. But you know, despite my hang-up about Lincoln constantly talking about the RIP Hardcore multi-tool, that thing proved to be essential during the movie's climax. After being presented with all the multi-tools he could ever ask for, Lincoln used the handcuffs from the tool to confine Santa to a table when the big guy was distracted, and used the tool to break into the underground coal mine to rescue his family. Granted, the fat guy did manage to break free in a matter of seconds, but at least the multi-tool was good for something and not a complete waste. Lincoln gave each member of his family their own multi-tool to use as a weapon during the fight against the evil Christmas creatures. It just so happened to have a fishing hook function, which Lincoln used to save Duncan from falling when they were climbing the mountain. Now I can see why Lincoln wanted that multi-tool so badly. That thing contained all kinds of various built-in features. From simple mechanic tools to a hairdryer to a freaking chainsaw. I just love how this thing had a very specific function for each member of the family, especially when the situation called for the use of a certain feature just for the sake of plot convenience. Overly cartoony, but still entertaining nonetheless. Anyway, this is where Duncan's character arc also comes full circle. Upon seeing Lincoln risk his life to save Christmas, rescue his family, and help restore the magic at the North Pole, Duncan believes this kid truly does belong on the nice list. He realizes his naughty and nice system is not as simple as he thought it was. He was more concerned about coding and algorithms than what makes a person a person. In other words, despite saying his data wasn't capable of being wrong, it turned out that it could be. The lesson he learns is basically the same one Lincoln ultimately learned. The lesson here is that no one is just one thing. No one is nice all the time, and no one is naughty all the time either. It's up to you to decide on what kind of person you want to be. But if it's true that no one is either good or bad all the time, then why weren't there more names flipping back and forth on the tinsel system? Lincoln's name was the only one that was flipping, and it doesn't matter if this flip-flopping was taking place on Christmas Eve. Lincoln was already said to be screwing up long before Christmas, and you would think his family would also be screwing up. Given what I said earlier about the entire family choosing to make bad decisions in the TV series, saying the tinsel system made a mistake would be an understatement. Like I said, conveniently ignoring the bad behavior of nearly every main character and only highlighting the faults of one is how this story is set up. In the end, the Loud family saved the day, and Santa decided to grant Lincoln a very special Christmas wish. With a little magic, Santa resets everything from the previous day so Lincoln and his family can have the Merry Christmas they were supposed to have. This time, Lincoln managed to make it onto the nice list and was given a very special present from Santa and Duncan. It's the Lincoln Loud Limited Edition Mighty Mega Multi-Tool for everyday heroes who save Christmas. Basically the same multi-tool from before, but with a picture of Lincoln's face instead of RIP Hardcore's. So Lincoln messed up Christmas all in the name of a multi-tool, helped save the day with the assistance of a multi-tool, and is subsequently rewarded for his heroism in the form of a multi-tool. Would this be considered a full circle moment? I think so. Of course, Lincoln is the only one who remembers everything that happened at the North Pole because the rest of the family had their memories erased. Yep, they really went for that kind of ending. The story ends with Santa and Duncan watching the family from the North Pole and taking note of how it took a flipper to open their eyes about their naughty versus nice data system. Santa says it's time Duncan finally implemented that system update, something Duncan wanted to do at the very beginning of the movie. When you really think about it, the entire conflict would have been resolved in a matter of seconds had Santa not been impatient and stopped Duncan from performing that system update. Santa deciding to go old school with how he and his elves determine who ends up on the naughty or nice list would have shaved off a good 70 minutes of runtime, and the movie would have ended right there. Does this technically make Santa the true enabler of the conflict? Maybe, but as they say, what's a movie without conflict? But hold up! I'm not finished yet. This last section of the video is going to cover the animation, music, and a few other miscellaneous things. In terms of visuals, the animation in this movie is really good. Even though Jam-Filled Entertainment oversaw the animation process, the presentation looks a lot more cinematic compared to No Time to Spy. The Christmas movie appears to have the same kind of visual aesthetic as the Netflix movie, so it comes off as the kind of film you'd see in theaters. As far as things go, I can't really complain about the visuals. Between the designs of everything at the North Pole, Gingerhausen, and the many action and chase sequences, this movie succeeds when it comes to animation. Sometimes it looks a little silly and cartoony, but like I said, I can't really complain. Of course, all these visuals are nicely complemented by the film's soundtrack. The music was composed by series regular Jonathan Highlander. I don't know if I'm overselling it here, but he really went all out when it came to the music. He took some classic Christmas songs and gave them a more dramatic tone. You can hear a more intense version of Carol of the Bells during the scene where Lincoln is chasing after Duncan. Later, during the fight at the North Pole, you can hear the Nutcracker Suite while the Louds are fending off the evil army of elves, snowmen, and, very appropriately, nutcrackers. I also can't forget the songs performed by the main cast. Off the Gingerhausen is my personal favorite. Despite my complaints about the story, the song did a decent job of illustrating the difference between Lincoln and the rest of his family when it comes to the holiday season. While Lincoln is more concerned about getting his Christmas present, the rest of the family sing about the non-materialistic aspects that make the holiday wonderful. Then there's Santa Claus is Naughty This Year. This one is just okay, not really the kind of song I would listen to on repeat. It has a good rock and roll rhythm and it's fine for storyline purposes, so I'll give it that. However, I do appreciate the Christmas Carol reference it made. The ghosts and shackles are a reference to Jacob Marley from Charles Dickens' classic novel. And finally, there's Christmas Time in the Loud House that plays during the end credits. Not much I can really say about this one other than it has a solid rock and roll rhythm and Lincoln performs the vocals. It probably would have sounded better if Luna was the one singing it, but obviously the movie wasn't about her. And actually, this would be a good time to mention the Casagrandes references seen during the movie. There's a coyote plush in Lola's bedroom, it being a reference to Punguari's coyote form from the Casagrandes movie. You can also spot a picture of the movie's main villain on a missing persons poster, that villain being Ukumu. And if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the Gingerhausen postcard, you can just make out an image of Ronnie Ann. Nice to know the spinoff is being kept alive and well and not completely forgotten. You'll also notice that the elevator at the North Pole goes up by using a gold-plated Santa head with a movable arm. Laying a finger aside of Santa's nose is a reference to the classic Christmas poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas. Lenny even recites that specific part of the poem. Oh, and let's not forget Rita's mini subplot where she makes it her mission to complete her Nutcracker collection. But not just any Nutcracker collection. She has Nutcrackers designed after the one and only Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I guess that means these heroes in a half shell are canon to the Loud House universe, at least in the form of collectible merchandise. It's not too often the Loud House makes a direct reference to another popular media franchise, so I was pleasantly surprised to see a subtle crossover between two well-known Nickelodeon properties. I also noticed that the Naughty or Nice logo is just a different version of the logo used for the Netflix movie. In a side-by-side comparison, they're virtually identical. The only differences would be the design of the green banner and how each logo uses a different orange-colored object. When I first saw that, I was like, wow, how cheap can you get? Then there's Gerald, one of the elves who seems to either hate or is simply jealous of Duncan. He's a jerk when the North Pole is all happy and nice, and then he becomes an even bigger jerk when the North Pole turns evil. He doesn't really add too much to the story other than being the one to suggest sending Duncan to Royal Woods and leading the evil Christmas army into battle. And lastly, the movie did something many of us thought would never happen. We finally got to see Lucy's eyes! Granted, only one eye is visible, but still. After all these years of wondering what kind of eyes Lucy has hidden behind her hair, not to mention the many fan interpretations of how she would look with her hair pulled back, we finally got an answer. 3 eyelashes and bags? Yeah, that sounds about right for Lucy. Now the fan artists have an official basis to work with, so now we're one step closer to a complete face reveal. Will we see both of Lucy's eyes before the end of the series? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But hey, that's why fan art exists. If the show won't do it, the fandom will. Make it happen, Loud House artists. So that was the Naughty or Nice Christmas film, and now I have to ask the big questions. Was this movie worth the hype? Is it just as good, if not better, than the other movies and/or Christmas specials? As much as I want to say this movie was a fun experience, I'm afraid I can't say that. At least, not fully. In my honest opinion, this movie fell incredibly flat and didn't even come close to meeting expectations. For all the good stuff I was able to find, I also found just as much bad stuff, and the bad stuff is pretty hard to ignore. The nicest way I can put it is that it's not the worst movie in the Loud House franchise, but this one could never hold a candle to No Time to Spy. While the movie succeeds with its animation, music, character designs, humor, and action sequences, it's the writing of the characters and story that brings it down, just barely breaking even at being watchable. The script manages to get some things right with its characters in terms of how they keep the narrative going, but the presentation of the characters in general is one of my biggest complaints. When you have a movie that feels like it just ignores the lore of the main series and positions one of its main protagonists as the only flawed character, it makes you think the entire film should have been focused on something other than an already established Nickelodeon property. Either that, or focus the story on a character from the series who would be better suited for the lead role. Much like the Netflix movie, Naughty or Nice is an example of what happens when people who have little to no knowledge of the show are allowed to write the script. The final product comes off as something straight out of fanfiction and leads you to believe it takes place in a universe separate from the main show. Whether the events of this movie will be brought up in future episodes, I'm not entirely sure. If it does happen, then so be it. If not, I would say it's for the best. So if you're a fan of The Loud House, you may not personally enjoy this one, and you'd probably be better off watching the Christmas specials from the TV series. It's not something I plan on watching every year, but as always, that's just my opinion. With that said, I give A Loud House Christmas Movie, Naughty or Nice, 2.5 stars out of 5. Well folks, that concludes my review of A Loud House Christmas Movie, Naughty or Nice. Now that you know what I thought of it, I just have to ask, what did you guys think of the movie? Sound off in the comments below, and be sure to click that subscribe button for more Loud House related content. That's going to do it for me. I'll catch you guys for the next video, but until then, this is SteamTeamRedubUK, CC Trainor-Ling, signing off. Peace out, home slices, and from my family to yours, have a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all.